Hi there! Today I decided to make Ludo from the movie Labyrinth out of polymer clay. I really do hope you enjoy the video, and let's start sculpting. Like I do with pretty much every sculpture, I start off with a lump of foil. I scrunch it up kind of into a ball. He has kind of a weird bean-shaped body for the most part, so I kind of made it that shape. I poked some holes in for the legs that I'm going to stick some wire into, and I make sure to keep enough excess wire so that there's enough in case I chop it too short. I bend it into shape. He kind of has a weird stature. He leans a bit forward, but I ended up making him more upright. And like I did with the legs, I also poked some armholes too. I always remember watching Labyrinth as a kid and thinking that it was a bit strange and creepy, but now that I'm a bit older I can definitely appreciate it a bit better. Like usual, I use super sculpey polymer clay. I just think it's kind of the nicest clay to use. I also whack it a bit with my my rolling pin, so that it's a bit easier to squish and mould and roll. It's definitely quite hard once it comes straight out of the packet, but if you warm it up a bit, it'll get easier and won't bruise your hands as much. So I use a slab of clay and just place it on top of the foil, just to get the base clay down, and then I'll add some shape to it later. I again use foil on the legs. I did try just putting clay straight onto them, but it ended up being way too thick and heavy, and I didn't like that because it was wasting quite a lot of clay. Once I had added the foil, I rolled out these lines of clay and just wrapped them around the arms. A lot of the time I add too much clay in areas, so I do have to take it off, and then other times I add too little and then I have to add it on. And this one was quite difficult in that aspect because I couldn't get the proportions right. I just had to add so much clay and then take so much clay away. Like here, I was adding a big chunk of clay to the back. And I did actually take quite a lot off the back in the end. I think his stomach is where I used the most amount of clay. I just kept layering it. This is only one layer that you see. I added probably about 3 onto it. I had to add quite a lot of clay to the legs as well and the arms because they were quite thin. And then the tail was the complete opposite. I ended up making the tail very, very thick because surprisingly there are a lack of images online of Ludo's tail. So it's quite difficult. I only found one model of it in the end. At this point I just kind of stopped working on Ludo and decided to go straight for the base, which now was a bad idea. I probably should have just laid the clay on top of it and then left the rocks because I added rocks, but whatever. I used clay glue to suction the clay down because it has a tendency of just not sticking to wood. And then I started working on the little stones that he has. Now with stones, I think it's quite important to realise that it doesn't matter what they look like. There are thousands of stones in the world, each of them look different. One of them out there might look like Ludo, who knows. But if you're making stones, it doesn't actually matter what they look like, because in the end they'll look like a stone in some way. And then instead of a wire, I used a toothpick and just cut it off, because they are a little bit more stable. They don't bend as much as wires, and I wanted it to kind of, you know, hold the head up. Except that he doesn't really have a neck, so there was nothing really to hold up. Also, he looks like the boogeyman here from Nightmare Before Christmas. Oogie Boogie. I definitely went very back and forth on the head and the shoulders and the back. That whole area was just very tough to do. See, I took a huge chunk out of it. I then made him do a little dance before putting him into the holes of the base to hold him up. I smushed down some of the clay to kind of fuse it with the base, the clay that I put on the base, and then I added his little toes. I added 3 because he has 3 toes on each foot. I don't know why he has 3, but he does. And I didn't use any foil or wire for them, even though I did for the fingers, just because they were already stable. It's fine. The fingers I did have to take off. I put them on and then I took them back off because they didn't work. But then I put them back on. I think it was because I made his arms a bit too long. I had to cut them back a bit. And then I started working on the second hand. I added some clay just to make it longer because that arm was too long and then the second arm was too short. When making his horns, I did account for the fact that I was going to add even more clay later on top of the head, more than what I just added, because when I do the fur, it's going to bulk out the shape a lot more. Again, that's why he does look quite skinny right now. This is also just a placeholder face. I gave him a face and then didn't work on it because it didn't look right, and I also needed to add the fur and everything because I was going to take it part layers. It's fine, that's my whole plan. I didn't make it look good. It might look like I was trying to. Don't be fooled. I used these little slits of clay for his eyelids and they were quite annoying. His eyes, again, like the rest of the face, I went back and forth on it. Just none of it really worked at first. Also, really random question that I've been thinking about all day. What do you think Ludo smells like? Because I feel like he might be a bit stinky, but I don't know what he would smell like. Comment down below. Oh yeah, I did that. And again, I knew that this was going to be just a placeholder face and there was no reason to do anything for it, and I just kept going. Anyways, it's time for the hair. This took me hours, days, and more hours to do. Lots of them were really long, some of them were really short, some of them were a bit chubby, some of them were wispy. There were a lot of hairs, like probably hundreds if I counted them by hand. It'd probably be hundreds, or about 300 I would say. Anyways, that's irrelevant. I kept laying them up and then realised that I needed to do the hands because I would have smushed the hands if I had tried to do them afterwards. I carved in the fingernails instead of adding more clay for them because I thought that would work a bit better. They look more like fingernails than if I were to just add little slabs on top of the fingers. Did it for the little toes as well. Again, why are there 3? Like I was saying earlier, I went a bit crazy with the fur. It was actually quite hard to get to the underside of his body, so I cut that out like completely because it wouldn't work. Also, I didn't add any on the underside of his tail because, again, I couldn't fit them in. They wouldn't have worked because they would have had to kind of been placed weirdly. Anyways, this is a different type of clay. That's why it's grey, because it's Cosclay. Yeah, fucking hell, buddy. That was me getting scared by my cat. She kind of just busted into my room and just meowed at me because I didn't know she was there. She was in my sister's room and then she was in my room and she scared me. I had to add so many clay that I got a bit overwhelmed in the end. At one point I cut it out of the video, but I went really fast and tried to rush it and it didn't go well. I had to scrape them all off. I worked up the back and then I worked on the stomach. And then I carved out the chest because I realised that there's actually a really big chunk of fur there. There's a big bit that I needed to add. So I added that. It's always okay to kind of go back and replace things. I mean, if what you're making has to look better, it has to be broken in order for it to look better in the end, I usually just kind of go with that. You don't have to, but I wanted it to kind of look accurate to Ludo, so I did that. And then you'll never guess what I did. I added more hairs. Also, I might as well just use the time now to explain what Cosclay is. It's a type of clay that actually bends after it's baking. So if there are any hanging bits like the tails or the underside of the arms, I used Cosclay so that if I were to touch it or knock it, it wouldn't just snap. Same with the ears as well. To make the ears, I just cut them out and then smoothed down the kind of harsh lines from the cut, and then made sure that there were enough indents in the middle of it. I got them the wrong way around at first, because I cut them out the wrong way around, thinking that the more inward side was supposed to go outside. Also, by the way, I don't think it's a great idea to blend Cosclay and regular polymer clay together. I don't think you're really supposed to. But I did it anyways because I didn't really see any other way of adding the ears on and the other pieces of fur. Also, at this point, I did actually start to take away that placeholder face. So I added the tongue in, pushed it back a little bit on the inside of the mouth, and added all of his face lumps. He has lots of lumps on his face, like his cheeks and around his nose. I don't know why, he just has a really lumpy face and that's okay. I'm not shaming him. I added his nose back on after taking it away and made sure that it was a bit more positioned correctly. He also has these two kind of big tusks at the front, which I added in, and I think they make him look really cute, to be honest. On a scale from 1 to 10, I think his face is probably about a 7 on how accurate it actually is supposed to be, which is alright. I mean, for faces I've done in the past, that's probably better than what I've ever done. I spent a lot of time using my tools to shape out his face a bit better, but I did put that on hold when I realised that I hadn't actually finished the fur on the back on the top of his head, so I went back to that. When doing his horns, I actually made the circles around it quite accurate. If I have to do circles around something, it never goes right, and this is one of the only times where each circle that I did went perfectly. And then I went in and scratched in the little details because, you know, they have that kind of horny texture. Oh, that is the wrong word to use. Also, I made this. I made this quite a few years ago. It was a very long time ago that I made that, and I know it doesn't look good, but for when I did it, I had only been sculpting for probably a couple months, so I think it looks alright. After I'd added all of the fur, I finally went in and added the little wrinkles on his face. It took me quite a while to do it, but I mostly just scratched in certain directions that wrinkles would go in. Didn't really go with any order. And then that was the last thing that I had to sculpt. I baked it, and then I started to paint it. I went in first with this kind of greyish colour. It was quite dark for what it was supposed to be, but I lightened it up later. I used this on the hands and the feet, and then you'll see that I also used it all over the back and the body in kind of little sections. These got completely covered. These were supposed to be kind of like skin showing through, because that is actually on the real model, and then I completely covered it by accident. But then I just went back and put them back in later. It might not seem like it, but painting the brown was really difficult. Every time I painted it, I then looked at it from a different angle and saw pieces that I had missed, like under each one of the little tufts of fur, and I think it was because I wasn't using enough paint, but then at the same time I had started to run out of paint, so it was just, I couldn't do anything. But then I finally did it. I did it. And then, like I said, I went back in with that grey that I was talking about earlier. I didn't try and do it cleanly because there was no point, because soon I was going to, well, now, dry brush over the top of the brown, which will then cover any bits that I had accidentally overlapped or gone wrong with the brown. I mean the grey. And then when I had gone wrong with the brown, I did go back in again with the grey, touched it up, especially on the hands and feet mostly. I then dry brushed on the hands, kind of a lighter grey, just to bring out those wrinkles that were underneath. Of course, I did the same thing with the horns too. I did do a bit of a gradient. I made the tips of the horns a bit lighter. Also, the Cosclay is the exact same colour as this brown that I used. Grey that I used. Touching up details like this is quite relaxing for me. I then used the same colour as I used for the ears and the highlights of the hands and horns for the base of the face, because the face is a little bit lighter than the rest of the body as well. I went in with this kind of pink for the mouth and then dry brushed again on top of the face with an even lighter grey. Got the colour right this time apparently, which was great. And then I blushed the cheeks a little bit, because again, it's how the model is. Everything I'm doing is for a reason. And then the teeth were a bit too blindingly white, so later I went in, made them a bit more yellow, which you can't tell on camera, but I know that I did it. As a lot of details on the face, like the eyes, the nose and the teeth, are quite small and fiddly, I had to keep going back and painting them multiple times. The base, I started with this darkish yellow colour. I also painted the wood a similar colour. I made it very wet so that you can still see the grain of the wood. And then I touched it up where I had kind of messed up around the base of the feet. I used wet brushing to put in the darker colours and then dry brushing to bring out the highlights. As the final finishing touch, I used a bit of gloss inside the mouth, the nose and the eyes. And then Ludo's finished. I spent so long on this one, over a week, which I was only really expecting to spend about half a week on. But of course, the fur made it quite difficult and quite long. I really am grateful that you stuck around this long if you did. And if you really did enjoy it, then I do recommend liking and subscribing if you want to, because it really does help me out a bunch. And you'd be able to see more like this in the future. Have a great day. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye. Bye bye.